Welcome, everyone. I'm just going to let a few more attendees trickle in, and then we'll begin. All right. Hello, I'm Lisa Bickmore. I'm the Poet Laureate of the state of Utah, and welcome to this session of the Utah Poetry Festival for 2023, Poetry and Art Collaborations. Before I introduce the moderator of this panel, Danielle Dubrasky, I want to acknowledge and give thanks to the Utah Humanities and the Division of Arts and Museums, who have both provided funding and support for this festival. Thanks also to Salt Lake County Zoo Arts and Parks for their underwriting of arts and humanities activities, including this festival. I want personally to thank Laura Stott-Rogers, Nancy Takis, Michael Lavers, Kara Vandegraff, Cindy King, and Danielle Dubrasky, who have been the planners and organizers of this festival with me. Without the efforts of all of these agencies and people, this festival would not be possible. Danielle is going to explain how the program will go today, but I want to just introduce her to you. Danielle Beezer-Dubrasky is the author of the full-length poetry collection, Drift Migration from Ashland Poetry Press, the chapbook Ruin and Light from Anabiosis Press, and the limited edition letterpress art book Invisible Shores from Red Butte Press, the University of Utah. She also co-edited with Karen Anderson the Torrey House Press anthology Blossom as the Cliff Rose, Mormon Legacies in the Beckoning Wild. Her poems have been widely published in such places as Terrain.org, Pilgrimage, Sugar House Review, Saltfront, etc. Danielle is a great organizer and leader in the arts throughout the state and in her own locale, and her writing and teaching have been much recognized and rewarded. I'm going to turn the time now to you, Danielle, for the panel and let you take it from here.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa, for inviting me to moderate this panel on poetry and art collaborations. It's something I've had some experience with myself. I've invited two pairs of poet-artist collaborators to discuss their experience of working together on these two art forms that seem like they would be disparate, but in fact, there's quite a lot of intersection there. I've asked them to share parts of the creative work resulting in these collaborations. So we're going to start with presentations and so you can visually see the results of these collaborations. We'll start with Natalie Padilla-Young and artist Maxie Spiess. Natalie Padilla-Young co-founded and manages the poetry magazine Sugar House Review by day. She works as by day she works as the art director for a Salt Lake City ad agency. Her first book, All of This Was Once Underwater, is just out from Quarter Press. Natalie's poetry has appeared in Green Mountain Review, Tampa Review, Rattle, South Dakota Review, Los Angeles Times, Tar River Poetry, Terrain.org, and elsewhere. She serves on the boards of the Utah Arts and Light Scatter Press and lives in southern Utah with the poet Nano Taggart and two very, very adorable dogs. Maxie Spiess has a bachelor's degree in design with a main focus on illustration and comics from Munster School of Design and a master's degree in literary writing and editing from the University of Hildesheim. She currently works as a freelance illustrator. Her favorite techniques are ink drawing and lino cut, and she is coming to us from Germany. So we so appreciate you taking this time. So Natalie and Maxie, I'll just let you go ahead and take over at this point.
Okay, great. I think what we wanted to just talk about first is a little bit how we got started on the collaboration, which is with Quarter Press. So when Quarter Press offered me a contract for my book, I knew it was going to be illustrated because they illustrate all of their books, which is really cool. And it's part of why I wanted to have them publish my book, is because their books are so beautiful. And the illustrations that I had seen from other books were so lovely, but they used a different illustrator for each book. So Chris Smith, who runs Quarter Press, when we were talking about the contract for the book, he sent a couple of options for illustrators just as samples, sort of as what he was thinking might work to fit the aesthetic of my book. And even though I'm a very visual person and I had been working on this book for a long time and there's a lot of imagery in it, I didn't have any visual sense of what it might look like to be illustrated. So one of those illustrators samples that he showed me, I really connected with the style of it. We didn't end up working with him, but Maxie, when we looked at her portfolio, she had a couple of illustrations in there where the line work really felt like it might work with what was going on in my book. And that might sound weird if you're not into art or you haven't done art yourself, but you know, there's different qualities to different lines. And I just thought, I think this might be it, but I was really quite nervous about it. So that's when Chris introduced Maxie and I over email, and we started our correspondence of how the book might play out and what illustrations she was thinking would be illustrated. I guess also we asked what I would think might be illustrated, but I wanted Maxie to choose what spoke to her. So Maxie, I don't know if there's anything you want to say about how the process started for you.
Yeah, I was really happy that I had so much, free hand, like in which poems to choose. So I read the whole book, and I was really captured by the whole language and melancholy of it, and the little bit of weirdness of the theme. And then I chose, my first selection, what I thought would be cool to illustrate. And I was really nervous too about if I would be choosing the right poems, because I felt it was a very personal book in some areas maybe. And I had a feeling I should be really sensible working on it. So I was really nervous, and I was happy when Chris and Natalie were they were cool with my selection. And then I started sketching, and it was really reassuring to be in close contact with not only the publisher but also the author herself, because I believe that sometimes it's the author wishes for other things than the publisher might. So it was really reassuring to work with you yourself on the book.
Yes, and I feel like the whole process was really great, and it happened pretty quickly. We started in May of last year, so it's not even a full year. The whole thing has been designed and produced and is out in the world. So it seemed, it's kind of fast, but also I think it just is so beautiful. And when Maxie talks about it being weird, well, I'll just give you a really short summary. Like what's happening in this book is it's based in Utah with Utah scenery and history, but mixed with speculative fiction. So the three main characters are the monster that has lived in the Great Salt Lake for centuries, and an alien, because there are space aliens living in Utah, and then a human woman. So there's a mix of that. So I think that now that we've said that, we probably can go into the actual art and poems that we are going to show you.
All right, I'll try my best to do. Yes.
While Maxie is setting this up, I just want to comment about the line, how that's such a great technique, both in terms of poetry and art. And I thought it was interesting, Natalie, that the line spoke to you in her work.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, in poetry and in art, like they're different, and yet they have a lot of similarities, and that there can be such a different range of what a line is in thickness and length and style. So this is one of the illustrations that Maxie did on this PowerPoint slide, which was not a main illustration, but they're kind of like filler illustrations, which I'm sure there's a better word for that, but that they kind of, I think this one's at one of these section heads, but it's really lovely, of little brine shrimp.
Yeah, I thought it was so cool that there was only this one tiny species living in the Salt Lake, being able to survive, and it's those tiny little shrimp things. So if everyone can see it, I'll start now with the first poem, Natalie.
I can't see the next slide yet. Did you transfer to the next slide?
Yeah, I did, but I'm not sorry. So you can see the first one or nothing?
Just the first one.
All right, I'm so sorry.
Oh no, it's okay. It might
be lagging.
Yeah, like we said, Maxie's in Germany, so it might take a while to make it across the world.
And try to. I can try to open it in a different format.
We could also go to our backup, which is to have Utah Humanities show it for us.
Yeah, maybe that's what we'll need to do. I'm so sorry, maybe it's the connection. So Emily, can you help us out?
Oh, there it is. It's showing now.
Up. It's showing. All right.
Then yeah. Okay. So this poem is called Capitol Reef, and you can see the beautiful illustration that goes right alongside it in the spread in the book. And this is actually the first poem I wrote in the collection. So Capitol Reef, now miles from any real city, roaming in a red rock bowl, she recalls a time at 13 when a stray attacked. Walking the sea floor, boots fill with red dust, rusty animal heads, pioneers' tombstones, commitment not an option, no way for her to describe, to know how. Still, its giant departure is clear, a pulse outlined in chalk. She claims old bites are good reason to give up an adopted dog after 6 days. The look in the canine eyes, endless. The stare, like finding a giraffe body under a skiff of snow, breaking things off, keeping things up. All of this was once underwater.
So I love that you're saying it's the first poem you wrote for the collection, because it's also the first picture I had in my mind and the first illustration I sketched out when I began working on this. And it was also one of the poems that really stuck out to me when Chris gave me the first snippet of the book to read. So that's really cool. Yeah, you see here the protagonist, she, the human woman. I wanted to sort of set the tone for the whole book. So make it a bit melancholy, but not really sad, but looking inward and reflective, and sort of set the atmosphere here. And because I found Natalie's style so beautifully worded, I thought it must also be decorative to look at and to be nice somehow. And yeah, like the poem says, she's maybe hiking, she's walking in this Capitol Reef National Park, this red dusty bowl, and thinking about her past. There's the dog skull and these little algae fossils in the stones, and you can maybe think that the sky and the swirly structures there could also be the being underwater, but we don't know for sure. And here you can also see the color themes or palette I chose for the whole look, because first Chris was like, yeah, maybe we should do it in black and white, and I was like, maybe we can do it in colors, would be so nice. And because I looked at those Utah mountain rock photos and thought those colors are really stunning, all these red hues and oranges, and everything looks like sunset. There's nothing we have that looks like this here. So I thought really cool. And because of this, I chose a color palette of like warm tones, reddish browns, and pink, because of the Great Salt Lake has this pink section that also looks really fantastic. So that's what the color theme of the book turned out to be. Yeah.
Maxie, I love hearing you talk about this, and I'm so glad we've had an opportunity to do this, because I didn't ever, having looked at this so many times, I didn't realize that the sky could also be water, but it's totally there. And I love hearing you talk about the colors too, because I feel like the color palette you chose for the images is perfect. And for me, it was also unexpected. I'm not someone who generally loves a light pink, but it really does feel like it works so well for this book. So in some ways, I feel like you being in Germany, and you probably have never been to Utah. It doesn't, in some ways it seems like a far match, but in another way, it's like you're seeing everything really fresh, having not been here or really probably done much research on Utah beforehand. So in some ways that's so perfect, because the whole book is about aliens and feeling alien and Utah being alien. I just think that you were like the perfect match to do all of this. And I love hearing you talk about these illustrations. So
yeah, I really love doing them. So
yeah. So if you want to try and move to the next slide, that is the line drawing without the color on the. Well, let's see if it works. Fingers crossed.
Good. Do you see it?
No.
Oh no.
Sounds like it might take just a minute for that to show up as well. I also was struck how you seem to capture the tone, like just Utah, the tone, like an emotional tone, even without having visited this place, through these illustrations. So we'll have time for just one more poem, as that comes up. And although Emily, do you want to go ahead and share your screen? Should we go ahead and do that, since this might be taking some time?
Yeah, so I don't know if Maxie, you want to say anything about this, but
no, just do the next poem.
Okay.
We have about a minute, and then we'll shift over, and then we can come back and discuss this as well.
All right, great. I'll hurry and read this. An ambush of major and minor, the monster sings. An underwater witness, he felt the wagons and hand carts, the Mormons rumbling the valley, and knew everything about their new ground. Knew the square inches riddled with salt had once been his living room. He felt the building, the thunks and thuds of lean-tos and pews, the swift start of empire. He heard generations and prayers being made, heard their songs, the combined power, hundreds of voices singing Zion, one giant desperate beauty. Over 100 years and still the notes linger, just below the surface, knock his chest in sleep, tumble from his mouth as he swims, pains of faith and cheer on repeat. These songs he sings to a thrumming, a glug, to an end.
Yeah, I really love this one because I love the monster of all the characters the most. He's really cool, and also I like the tone of the monster poems because I think, the tone is a bit different. Here I wanted to show these like Mormon pilgrims or settlers like coming into the country with their wagons and their horses. But the horse in the background, horse skull person, people think could also be like a cameo appearance of the monster itself. But spoiling a bit here, I chose not to show the monster in full because there are so many legends around this Salt Lake monster and so many different appearances it could take. Like it could be in fur, could look like a whale, could look like the Nessie monster. So I chose to not show it at all because the protagonist is always searching for him, but she doesn't know how he looks like, and so we don't too. Yeah.
Thank you. That was so perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'll put a shout out to look at the schedule. Natalie, you are reading your poetry tonight at 7 o'clock. Is that correct? And thank you again for sharing your insights about that collaboration. We will now shift over to presentation by Catherine Coles and Marnie Powers-Torrey. Ghost Apples, Catherine Coles' 9th collection, will be out in May from Red Hand Press, which also published Wayward and The Earth is Not Flat. Her prose books include A Stranger I Become, On Walking, Looking, and Writing, Look Both Ways, a memoir, and 2 novels. She has co-created several books and installations with artists Maureen O'Hara-Ure and David Wolke and others. She served as the 3rd Poet Laureate of Utah and Poet in Residence at the Natural History Museum of Utah and the Salt Lake City Public Library for the Poets House Fieldwork Program. She has received awards from the NEA, the NEH, the National Science Foundation, and Arctic Artists and Writers Program, and the Guggenheim Foundation. She is a distinguished professor at the University of Utah. And Marnie Powers-Torrey received an MFA in photography from the University of Utah and a BA in English and philosophy from Boston College. She is the managing director of the Book Arts program at the University of Utah and an associate librarian at the J. Willard Marriott Library, and is the master printer for Red Butte Press. As a maker, Powers-Torrey places equal value on process and product. The aesthetic and concept of a piece are inherent to its mode of manufacture, materiality, and the space and time in which it's made. So I think, Marnie, you have a PowerPoint that you'll go ahead and share. And I was first introduced to Marnie Powers-Torrey when I approached her about creating an art book of 2 poems of mine about the landscape surrounding Cedar City. The resulting art book is Invisible Shores with photographs by Marnie of the Southern Utah landscape. This art book was also connected to another project. The Orchestra of Southern Utah had commissioned a composer to create an original piece that incorporated my poetry, and thus Red Butte Press created a special edition of Invisible Shores that includes the orchestral piece. And it was an incredibly wonderful experience to do that collaboration. So I'm so excited now to turn the time over to Marnie and to Catherine Coles to talk about their collaborative processes.
Thank you, Danielle, and thank you so much for having us here today. I'm here representing the Red Butte Press as a whole and wanted to talk a little bit about who we are and what we do. There we go. So this is a shot of some of the presses in our studio. We do print most things letterpress. We do some digital printing and some risograph printing as well. And our staff and faculty are shared by the Book Arts program as well as the Red Butte Press. So we are one and the same, and we tend to sneak in Red Butte Press projects, so to speak, when we are able to find the time. So traditionally, fine press was fairly staid, and I would say that was the case with the Red Butte Press as well. We were focused solely on Western works and frequently a kind of more canonical approach. And, you know, where the text block and the imagery were largely separate and conformed to the shape of the page, often in rectangles, particularly with prose work. But over the years, the team has moved away from that model towards a more innovative and novel approach that I like to call the new fine press. The team has also moved to a very collaborative approach where the designer, the lead binder, the lead printer, and the master printer production manager contribute to ideation, design, and production. And those currently are all faculty members. So staff with skills and interests, including undergrads and grad studio assistants, are crucial parts of production, and these individuals do gain skills that help them move forward in small and fine press publishing, conservation, job printing and binding, and of course, many are today active book artists. So I will pass it on to Kate.
Oh, I don't think I realized that that was going to happen, but I'm happy to speak about this. This is problems of description in the Language of Discovery. It's a book that came out of my trip with the National Science Foundation to Antarctica. And it was designed, Marnie, you can help me with this, primarily by David Wolke. He did the art on it. The idea for the design, I'm very thrilled about this because I'm usually not involved in design decisions all that much at all. But when we had our first meeting, I mentioned that we had two scientists here at the university, Cindy First and Ken Goldberg, who had both been to Antarctica at the same time I was, though in a different place. And the scientists carried these little waterproof notebooks, and I had seen theirs, and they were full of drawings. And we were able to persuade them to lend those precious objects to the press and to David. And the design for the book itself came out of that. The foldouts that David and Marnie, you can correct me about who did who. This is why I thought I wasn't the one who was going to be talking about this.
I can. Do you want me to share that little portion before you share your awesome nugget? Yeah.
So why don't I don't know what my awesome nugget is. I thought we were going to mostly do this Stranger book.
Absolutely. You were just going to talk about your role in design, but I just want to credit the people that at the time, David Wolke was our designer, and Emily Tips, our lead binder, and then Mary Toscano did the artwork in this, and there were a larger group of us who produced the book together.
It's great. So I'm one person and I'm doing one little part. And that's actually the great thing about being involved in a project like this, is that you realize how much bigger than your own vision the final product can be.
And Kate, I think this is where you wanted to talk about your long-term collaboration with Maureen.
All right, so sitting there in front, perched in front, I think you'll recognize me from the haircut, and next to me is Maureen O'Hara. We have been collaborating together for well over 30 years. I'm just going to say something very quick about the origin of that, and if people have questions or want more, they can ask during the Q&A. But we started on our collaboration. I knew Maureen because I'd taken a drawing class from her, and so when I was invited to be a member of a collaborative group under an NEA-funded project, they asked me about visual artists, and I mentioned Maureen. And we met with this group, which included a dancer and a musician, really, really great people. But it quickly became clear that what they wanted to do was create something on stage in real time. And Maureen and I were kind of looking at each other. We didn't know each other well, but we could see each of us the horror crossing the face of the other, because we disappear into in my case, my study, and in her case, her studio. And we emerge blinking against the light 6 months later with a small sheaf of something that we've done. So we politely declined, and then almost immediately began collaborating together. And that has gone on for many years now.
This image is actually from the release at the Phillips Gallery. So Kate, I don't know if you want to say a couple words about how that went.
It was great. And I think we should probably keep moving through these slides.
Okay, great. Okay, so Kate, if you want to go ahead and read, I will move through the pages of the book.
So I'm going to read the whole book, and this will take 5 minutes, so nobody should panic about that. And then Marnie is going to show images from the book, and I'll just hold up the cover. It's very slender. It's very beautiful. And I will say that with both books, it was a really high priority of mine. This is one of the reasons that they're so small, that they be affordable as art books go. And these are handmade, and that takes affordability off the table to some extent, but I wanted to imagine that somebody with a little bit of money in their pocket could walk into Ken Sanders or the King's English and make an impulse purchase of a fine letterpress book. This is another beast. Winged like us, part divine, part divination. Pleasure is in knowing, not knowing, who never could say. who can't guess what God might be thinking, any God at any moment, or how a deity might tell us what it thinks, who keeps finding lint in her bathrobe pockets and little sweets that have lost their wrappers. Oh, sweet, oh, loss. God knows where anything goes. Lunar eclipse. Lying in bed, your shadow moves. Lying, thinking your shadow flies across the moon's face. Say time to rise. In the dark down here in brush and grass, small bodies pulse, almost awake. Say blink, naked eye watches the moon vanish. But your cheap camera made for talking keeps seeing a singular shining orb, not the giving way, showing a black field. You are talking to yourself again. Why won't you settle for your eyes, memory falling? Be a warm body without devices, watching the lapsed moon darkly sail the hills. It's too early to call anyone, and you've nothing going. Ghost ship, shadow wolf, self-smudge. Since before you were time, you felt this way. Close your eyes then. I say, close your eyes. A lot of these are sonnets. This is the title poem, Stranger and Stranger. All love is odd. Never again from a distance shall I see you unless we are torn asunder. What could rend you now from me apart from final rendering? Don't growl at me. Dog body, I'm not your monstrosity, only a simple furnishing of life, no stranger than the hound lazing at your feet, inhabiting the persistent fact of flesh, passing weird. Linger with me here in twilight's gruff boredom. Don't nod off. This is actually dedicated to Maureen's husband, Lincoln Ure, who died too young not long ago. We were at one of her exhibitions, and I was standing in front of a whale painting that she had, and he quoted from Psalm 104, the first line of this poem, which is called Bewilder. He made the Leviathan for the sport of it, the Lord of my childhood, her fluke the size of 2 sleek rowboats for lifting and drawing down knife-like into the water, or for slapping. So many gestures a fluke or fin can make with or without ruin. I remember a whale rolling sideways, just it appeared so I could see her waving or flirting, her eye deeply winking at my eye, no more human for that. Can't even say she was real beyond the tide of my imagining, or I beyond hers. So completely out of scale were we, so soundly did she sink and finally not come up. The Lord of my childhood made her to flirt and nurse, to sing, but not to me, for enchantment and for love. Believing I am not superstitious, I make her like any muse to bewilder me, to say as the wave curls overhead, cast loose, be charmed, be lost, for God's sake, remember, be wild. Then I do believe one more sonnet. This is San Marcos Flores. Maureen and I visited Venice separately and both fixed on many of the same images. San Marcos Flores. Only years later will I remember to look down, eyes not undazzled yet by golden ceilings, but half accustomed, ready to stray. And so, crossed by centuries of boots, peacocks draggle tails and blackbirds poise in windless branches, imagined a sea away, reimagined here and here. Every little bird means something, if only to itself. How like me to forget what holds me, to believe everything uplifting lives in the rafters. See here a pair of crimson lions laid in stone, gazing upward, hopeful as my old dogs to meet my eyes.
And I know we're running short on time. I just wanted to show a couple of the images close up. You can kind of see the letterpress, which is known for its impression here at an angle. And then also talk about, this is the original imposition for the book, but when we started to work with the imagery, it was really difficult to translate to letterpress. So we had to make a lot of changes, and we're kind of resorted to analog in some ways. This is us cutting down the paper to begin. And this is a painting of Maureen's, which is called Into the Wilderness. It's 4 feet by 6 feet. And we took a small portion of this painting and chose to focus on this pensive and maybe slightly cranky fox, and then reduced it to black and white. And then the final negative looked like this. So I don't have a lot of time to go into the process, but wanted to show you that. And then also let you know that we do have a special event code for the 3 titles that you shared with, we shared with you today through redbuttepress.org.
Which makes them even more affordable. And I want to say something quickly about when Maureen and I collaborate. Basically, that means I visit her studio and she shows me some things, but mostly we gossip and drink coffee and listen to the NPR, talk about the NPR program that we were both listening to right before I got there. Or we go out to dinner. We're trying to negotiate that right now, or we drink wine or champagne. Sometimes we caviar if we're feeling especially full of ourselves, and we talk and we talk and we talk. And it's really important to us that I don't explain her paintings in my poems. You will have noticed this from the book, and she does not illustrate my poems. We have this ongoing friendship. It includes the work, and then we go away and we both make what we make, and then we come back together, and there are certain things we negotiate. So she will say, I have this painting and I don't have a title for it. And so she'll ask me if I have a title, or she'll take a title for a painting from one of the poems that I've given her. And sometimes I've taken a title for a poem after a studio visit from one of her paintings. And I think Stranger and Stranger might actually be the one where I said, oh, I think I'm going to use that for a title for a poem. And I walked out to the car and I sat in the car and I wrote the sonnet that became, do you remember this morning? Have I told this story? Good. Okay, so it's true. And I wrote the sonnet, and then that was really the inception for this. And Maureen, unlike me, and obviously I care about my poems, but and I spent a lot of time on them, and I care about the art, but Maureen is probably the most precious person about her images of anyone I've ever met. And one of the reasons that this project took 1.5 million years to come into fruition was that she could not manage to imagine her work not hand-colored, not in black and white. And we were trying to come up with this new model of an affordable book. And it's Marnie and her team that finally helped Maureen to, gave Maureen the images that helped her to imagine that this was a possibility. And I think we're all really, really happy with the way it turned out. And we had done a book before that was a hand-colored artist book that cost, I don't know, even no, Marnie, $500 or something like that. $200. Oh, that's not bad.
I believe it's $160 actually for the problems of description. So problems of description.
But what was Swoon? Do you remember? Do you remember what Swoon was? The one that we did together?
Oh no, yeah, I'm not sure, because she actually, that was printed at the Book Arts program by a student, so it wasn't a Red Butte Press title. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to thank both of you again for this, the presentation. And Catherine, what you spoke to was that concept of trust. I think that in any kind of active collaboration, so there's a trust that builds over time that you've described with the relationship with another artist that develops over time. And then Natalie and Maxie, there was a great deal of trust that had to happen in this process, but you didn't know each other but you'd seen each other's work. And so I think that concept of trust is so important, especially if you are you know, considering collaborating with an artist as a poet, that is a really key part of it. I also appreciate what you said, Catherine, about how just talking doesn't necessarily about the collaboration, but there's something about maybe bringing these two art forms together, that there's an intuitive connection. There's like an intuitive conversation, an invisible conversation that's happening, and it'll show up in the work itself somewhere. So I wanted to see if we have any questions that can be answered. Are there any questions, Lisa, that I haven't seen on the Q&A? So I don't know if there are any questions that anybody's posted a question. I have some one fast question if we have the time. Otherwise, if we do have questions.
We don't have any questions in the Q&A, so go ahead with your own.
Yeah, so the one question that I had, aside from that concept of trust, was how does the concept of the image allow for an intersection between poetry, whose medium is words, and the visual arts? So if you could just maybe, each of you just briefly just address that idea of how does the idea of the image allow for an intersection between poetry, whose medium is words, and any of the visual arts, which has a very variety of mediums to work with?
I will quickly just say that because I was first, I guess, a visual artist before I was a poet, or maybe, pretty simultaneously, and because I am an art director during the day and that's my job, I'm such a visual person that the line between poetry and imagery, visual art, is not a far jump for me, because I guess I'm already having visuals when I write anything or read anything. And so the illustration, I guess, it's not going to be exactly what you're imagining, but I guess if you are not a visual person, then it does give you that visual for sure. And I think processes, the more I talk to visual artists who are, actual artists and not just doing it as a career like I do for like making ads and stuff, a lot of their processes tend to be very similar to writing, which kind of surprised me when I first heard it, but then it makes a lot of sense, that a lot of the processes are the same in terms of inspiration and actual practicing of the art.
When I speak with my students, right now we're teaching the printed book class, where the students are required to use both text and imagery, and they print a limited edition book of their own ideas and design and writings. And I kind of see it as its own kind of grammar and language when the two intersect, so that I think visual art has a unique capability of being a little less distinct and exacting than text, and that I think they each serve to open one another, and they really do their own work. And I think that that's a really important relationship, and both meanings are expanded in both cases.
Thank you. Maxie or Catherine?
So I would say just quickly that my poems are often very abstract, but they are also very descriptive and full of imagery. And if I were to think about the poems in this book in particular, Stranger and Stranger, at least the original version of that, and I think that title's actually migrated from Painting to Painting with Maureen, but originally it was two very different sized and different looking dogs talking to each other. My poem is very abstract, and there's not a dog appearing in it, but there is growling and there is a dog body. And so I'm taking not only her title and applying it to marriage, but I'm also taking not the precise images, but some of the penumbra of those images that exist in language and putting those in the poem.
Thank you. Maxie?
Yeah, I think it's also often about choosing what not to show, because I know there are limitations of what I can do. And I think that was the case with Natalie's work. I often knew like, I can't do this. If I try to depict it like word for word, it will be corny and just, yeah, there's also this line you have to tread on.
And I love, Natalie, that you read the poem about the monster, and that Maxie, you did feel like you could not draw the monster. And Catherine, you said there's a dog body, there's growling, there's hints of it, but we don't see it. And thank you so much. And I love all the thoughts you brought together. Incredible conversations. Thank you. And thank you, Lisa, again, for helping to initiate this panel.
This, I feel like, was such a great treat, and I was looking forward to it, partly because I knew that it would feed a whole bunch of senses as well as my brain. So I really love this. Thank you so much for this really wonderfully provocative conversation. And thank you, Danielle, for your able moderation. And thanks all of you who came to listen. And I encourage you, I hope that you will come to the final event of the festival, which is the headline reading featuring Natalie, Abe Smith, and Jacqueline Osherow. Thank you, and I hope to see you tonight at 7.